gonna start with an alkane. So I'm gonna begin with an alkane, of which I'll just highlight it. Now, the first thing that you need to understand about an alkane, you need to know the general formula of an alkane. Now, the general formula of an alkane is basically CnH2n plus 2. So that is the general formula. Let's just indicate that that is the general formula of alkanes. So what a general formula basically does, ladies and gents, is that it tells us that when I have this amount of carbons, I will have this amount of hydrogens. But I'm going to show you how we deal with the general formula and how it brings rise to a molecular formula. Now, the first thing, alkane, we need to understand that it is a general formula. And then let's look at the second part. Now, let's focus on the second thing about alkanes. Now, we need to understand that alkanes are saturated compounds. Alkanes are saturated compounds. All right, for now, it actually does not make sense when I say saturated compound. But saturated compounds basically mean that they've got single bonds between the carbon atoms. We've got single bonds between carbon atoms. Let's just say C atoms. You just know that it's carbon atoms. Now, this is what you need to understand about saturated compounds. They've got single bonds between the carbon atoms, which means you'll find between the carbon atoms, you'll find something like this. It's just a single bond. So that is the second thing that you need to understand. The third thing that you need to understand about the alkanes is that they've got a suffix. Suffix, when you do English, you know, is the ending point of something. So they've got what we call a suffix. And that the suffix of the alkanes, we say it's actually what? It's actually ane. Now, you need to understand that ane comes from this ane, alkane. So it ends with an ane because it's an alkane in this case. Now, that's what you also need to understand. Sorry. Ane. So already we know three things. We know the general formula, that is a saturated compound, that it has a suffix of ane. And also, guys, you need to understand the functional group of alkanes is just single bonds. So if they ask you the functional group of alkanes, it's just single bonds between the carbon atoms. Now, let's look at the structures now of alkanes. Let's just see structures of alkanes. Structures. So this is where we are going to spend most of our time in. So we're just going to say structures. Now, we said alkanes have single bonds between carbon atoms. So which means surrounding the carbon atom also there must be single bonds. So this is an alkane. This is an alkane. Why? Because there are single bonds between the carbon atom. Specifically, the name of this alkane or homologous series is known as the methane. So methane means that there's only one carbon, only one carbon. So that is what you need to understand. Of course, ane generally tells us that it belongs to a homologous series that is called an alkane, of which we are going to get we are going to do the video whereby we explain the UPEC naming, but for now, just understand that an alkane has single bonds between the carbon atom, and you can actually see that there's only single, and single. So single bonds between carbon atoms, that is an alkane. Now let's look at example 2, and you are going to tell me is it an, let's just say that was example 1, and now we are going to do example 2. Now let's look at example 2. I'm going to just draw, and then you can feel free to pause the video and just look at it and tell me that is it an alkane? Is this an alkane or what? Now, Upon doing this, of course, you've paused the video and observed the structure. You can see that this is actually an alkane. Yes, we can prove that by saying yes, it's an alkane. And the reason why we're saying it's an alkane, obviously the reasons. There are only single bonds between carbon atoms, single bonds between C atoms. Now, what you need to understand, look at this carbon and look at this carbon. And what you need to notice that the bond that bonds these two carbons is single bonds. So that's what we focus on mostly when we look at alkanes. Now, single bonds, of course, you can see single bonds between carbon atoms. So those are alkanes. Nothing special about them. And then you can go on and put long chains. As long as there are single bonds between carbon atoms, that is an alkane. Now, what is the name of this alkane? Let's just name it, even though we haven't done with the UPEC naming of which we're going to do it. Now, because there are three carbons, so because there are three carbons, we are going to say this is a prop. And then, of course, it's an alkane. It will end with ane. So the name is a propane. Of course, I've explained there that, which means prop means there's three carbons, and then ane means it belongs to a homologous series, which is an alkane. So that is the first step in dealing with the homologous series. Of course, in the second video, we are going to be looking at the alkynes. Now, alkenes, whereby we say alkenes, they've got a double bond. Let's just write it down and make sure you subscribe and follow, because we are going to be doing the alkenes now. Alkenes. And what are we saying about alkenes? We are saying alkenes have a double bond between carbon atoms. And the double bond actually means something, guys. Double bond, there's actually a specific name of double bond, because remember we said single bonds means unsaturated compounds. We said single bonds means saturated compounds, meaning double bonds has to do with another name. So we are going to be discussing that. Make sure you subscribe so that you go with us. Thank you very much. Sharp.